You're listening to a Tax Justice Network podcast covering the 10 worst global offenders identified by the Financial Secrecy Index in 2018. In fourth place is Hong Kong with a high secrecy score of 71.05 out of 100 and over 4% of the global market. I'm Naomi Fowler, talking to tax justice campaigner Anthea Lawson. Hong Kong is number 4 in the 2018 Financial Secrecy Index. What are the indicators telling us this time? It's growing fast, we know that. What are the other changes of note?
Well, the shift to fourth place this time from second place in the previous Financial Secrecy Index is not so much because of big changes in the level of secrecy offered in Hong Kong itself, but because of other countries' scores shifting in the index. So the global share of the offshore financial market taken by the US, which came second this time, has grown substantially. Plus, the secrecy score in the Caymans, which came third, has increased. And so this seems to have pushed Hong Kong into fourth place. But look, let's get this in context. This is still a major secrecy jurisdiction. And it's growing in popularity. Since the G20 and the OECD started cracking down on secrecy in 2009, and new transparency measures like automatic exchange of tax information have started to be developed, dirty money has started moving east towards Singapore and Hong Kong. They're reportedly attracting wealth from abroad at more than twice the rate of Switzerland.
Yes, I've heard that one of the jurisdictions, or the jurisdiction that keeps Swiss bankers awake at night, is Hong Kong and Singapore.
That's right. So in 2015, Hong Kong had the world's highest concentration of ultra-high net worth individuals with more than $100 million. And the government promises in all of its publicity materials that it will be keeping intervention into the way in which the market operates to a minimum. This is a laissez-faire approach. It allows secrecy to flourish. Hong Kong offers a wide range of offshore services, including tax exemptions, transfer pricing facilities, escape routes from Chinese exchange controls, and various forms of financial secrecy, including the use of opaque companies and trusts that can be used in tax evasion and other crimes.
Right, and one of the big practices that does go on with Hong Kong is that it is a major location for round tripping, particularly for China. So tell us what round tripping is and why this matters so much.
Well, so if money is round tripping to Hong Kong from China, it means that Chinese investors are shifting their money to Hong Kong, they're dressing it up in offshore secrecy, and then they're returning it to China, masquerading possibly illegally as foreign investment in order to obtain special privileges afforded to foreigners. It's basically a way of not paying tax or of laundering money. And Hong Kong's role in relation to China is quite interesting. It has parallels in the role that the UK's overseas territories play for the City of London, which is funneling money into the country, into a financial centre without asking too many questions.
Right, and Hong Kong does offer a whole sort of tasty menu of tax benefits to companies and individuals who want to use it, doesn't it?
Well, Hong Kong doesn't tax capital gains or dividends or deposit interest. It has no inheritance taxes. Like many secrecy jurisdictions, it has a territorial principle which only taxes income arising in Hong Kong, while profits from overseas trading operations accruing to Hong Kong wealth managers are generally not taxed. It's also widely used as a base for transfer mispricing, which is where multinational corporations are shifting profits offshore to escape paying tax. And it doesn't help, therefore, that company ownership is not public in Hong Kong. So it's not clear from the outside which multinational companies have Hong Kong subsidiaries which they might be using in such transfer mispricing.
Right, very important information. In terms of a public register of the real owners of Hong Kong incorporated companies, there's no plans for that, are there?
No. So the Panama Papers showed that Hong Kong was Mossack Fonseca's most active centre in the world for the creation of shell companies. Mossack Fonseca was the law firm at the centre of the Panama Papers leak. After that happened, Hong Kong finally started to impose a licensing regime on the agents who set up companies. But that is not the same as putting the owners of the companies on the public record. So now you have lots of licensed agents, as opposed to unlicensed agents, setting up secretly owned companies. Great. Now, they've got another new law which will require companies themselves to identify and keep a register of their own beneficial owners. Now, that might be better than what they had before, but that is still really weak. It's saying you, the company, are required to know who owns you. Well, it still means authorities in other countries trying to track down owners of a company have to make a request through official channels, and that means they need to know what they're looking for, which mostly they don't. That is not a deterrent to those who want to misuse companies for tax evasion or other crime. There are many countries now creating public registers, and that is the new emerging global norm, and Hong Kong is nowhere near it.
Right, and even when it comes to the flimsy process that you've just described, if your real owners of a company can show themselves to have less than 25% ownership of the company, then they won't even take that information, even these licensed agents.
Yes, that's the threshold, though unfortunately 25% is a threshold in other places as well, so that's not just a Hong Kong problem.
We can't blame them for that. Okay, so let's look at how does Hong Kong do when it comes to the global common reporting standard, which is all about multilateral information exchange on an automatic basis. It's signed up, but yet again, as with many of the top 10 global offenders in the Financial Secrecy Index, it's choosing the bilateral route where it selects which countries it wishes to exchange information with.
That's right, and it's actually going further than that. So it's really going its own way. So Hong Kong did finally, under pressure, agree to join the Common Reporting Standard to share information on what earnings people have had with the countries where they're from. But whereas many countries have signed a multilateral agreement to make it happen, Hong Kong has decided not to do that. Now, this is separate from the fact that you can choose which countries to then exchange with. There are two stages. So most countries have signed a multilateral agreement and they then choose which other signatories of that multilateral agreement they can exchange with. That's already a limitation. Hong Kong hasn't signed the multilateral agreement. It wanted to pursue this on a bilateral basis, which means individual agreements have to be negotiated with each country. Now, that was taking rather a long time, and until quite recently there were only 3 countries on its list, and it was taking such a long time that the EU threatened to put Hong Kong on its non-cooperative blacklist that came out just at the end of last year. So that focused attention slightly, and although Hong Kong still hasn't completely changed what it's doing, in the autumn it introduced a bill to make it easier to make exchange agreements, and there are now a few more countries on its list. But this is still looking like a reluctance to really participate in an enthusiastic way. Interestingly, Hong Kong has also chosen voluntary secrecy. Now, that means it will provide information to its exchange partners about their citizens' earnings, but it's chosen not to receive anything. Now, that's really interesting, isn't it? That looks like they're just not that bothered about tax evasion. They're ticking the boxes they have to, and they're really not going to go any further.
Yeah, that's really quite shocking. And you would think that all this money pouring into a jurisdiction like this would be good for the people that live there. But what's really interesting about Hong Kong is it's very much a place the Financial Secrecy Index and the Tax Justice Network would identify as being a victim of the finance curse. What that means is that inequality levels in Hong Kong itself are really high, and it's got the worst income disparity of all developed economies, according to the United Nations, with 1 in 5 households living below the poverty line.
Yeah, this is really interesting, and it's another example of what TJN has seen offshore, which is that this money flying in does not benefit everyone in these jurisdictions. It does not spread around. So in 2014, there was a wave of protests and civil disobedience in Hong Kong that was ostensibly about reductions in political freedoms, but it was also about the steepening wealth divide and concerns about Hong Kong's role as a laissez-faire international financial centre. Many observers thought that was part of it too, as well as the more overtly political issues. Hong Kong now has the world's highest density of billionaire households, while median incomes have reportedly stagnated since 1999. This has happened while manufacturing, which began to plateau in about 1990, was eclipsed by a large growth in finance and services. Hong Kong's obviously not the only place where this has happened. And the reasons for it are complex, but Tax Justice Network believes that some of them look rather like the finance curse. which is a phenomenon it's identified that has parallels with the resource curse that affects many oil-rich countries and leaves them suffering terrible inequality. The finance sector ends up crowding out other sectors, creating a brain drain from them. During finance booms, other economic sectors get crowded out and can't make it back again. And it also offers huge possibilities for financial rent seeking. There are very easy revenues from the secrecy economy, and they become very attractive, but they do skew an economy, none of which is helpful for tackling inequality.